when a young woman walked outside her home to investigate a strange noise. She was abducted at gunpoint. But the victim knew something about forensic evidence, and she was determined to prove she had been inside the assailant's truck. The clue she left behind and her recollection of detail led police straight to the criminal's front door. Jackson Township is just north of Canton, Ohio, home to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It's an upscale bedroom community. Much of the area is undeveloped, especially along the old Erie Canal.
We have even areas where there's cows, and we get calls for cows and livestock in the roadway.
The McKernan family lived just 2 blocks from the canal. 18-year-old Stephanie McKernan shared the home with her husband, Jamie, and his 18-year-old sister, whom we'll call Megan. On Saturday night, May 6, 2000, Stephanie and Megan were outside when 2 men in a pickup truck stopped to talk.
Asked us both if we were single and how old we were, and we both said that we were not available.
The men were polite, and when rebuffed, drove off. A few hours later, after the women returned home, they heard a noise outside. Megan grabbed a flashlight. Stephanie picked up a can of spray paint, and both went outside. Stephanie regained consciousness. She called police.
Oh my God, you guys! I gotta get my brother! Did you have to get a license plate? I didn't get a license plate. I know the truck had a cap on it. I think it was blue.
When police arrived, Stephanie was hysterical, and she was unable to provide much detail about the crime. Police were skeptical, since the McKernan boys had numerous prior run-ins with police.
They're always running their motorcycles through the yards up and down the street. They're always having a party. They're always doing something. We're always down here for something. There's got to definitely be more to this than what we know.
But there was evidence at the scene to corroborate Stephanie's story. Officers found Megan's sweatshirt and sandals, along with the cover for the scope of a rifle. There were shoe prints leading in the direction the assailant was headed. At the bottom of the driveway, police found tire impressions, and near the road was a purple glove and an ice scraper.
My concern was I knew Megan, I knew her family. I feared for the worst. I feared that we were going to find her floating somewhere. And if we didn't act fast, that, my fears might become a reality.
Over the next few hours, Megan's family and the police searched the streets and parking lots of Jackson County, but she was nowhere to be found. 18-year-old Megan McKernan was kidnapped at gunpoint from the backyard of her home. Evidence left at the scene showed signs of a struggle, but revealed little about the kidnapper's identity.
This was obviously someone that Megan had no knowledge of, that they were not familiar with, and that this was actually a legitimate thing that had happened to Megan.
While investigators interviewed Megan's family and friends, a police officer kept watch at the crime scene. Suddenly, the officer saw a woman running towards him. It was Megan McKernan.
Her first words was, "I have been raped."
Although battered, Megan was fortunate to have survived her 2-hour ordeal.
An hour before, we were looking for her in a ditch, so to see her come running towards me was definitely a happy moment.
Police rushed Megan to a nearby hospital, which had a special unit to treat rape victims and preserve crucial forensic evidence. Nurses carefully collected and documented all of the evidence they could find, and also preserved her blood-stained clothing. Police photographed scratches on Megan's face and other injuries, including cuts and scrapes to her back and arms.
She did what she needed to do to get through the situation, and that is the success in itself, is to make it out alive.
Megan told police the assailant drove her to Boyd's Corner, a remote location about 5 miles from her home, and assaulted her in his truck.
I was trying to push him off me, but he had my hands above my head with one arm, and then he was holding himself up on the seat with the other. He said he'd like to have a girl like me. He'd like to get married to a girl like me, that I am so pretty, and that he is so sorry for beating me up.
Megan pleaded with the man to let her walk home.
He told me that he wouldn't let me walk because I didn't have no shoes on, and it was a pretty far distance from my house.
Instead, he offered to drive her.
She actually gave him better directions to get her back home. There were 2 ways to get there, and she actually talked to him about, don't go this way, it's faster.
He dropped her off a block from her home. Megan was able to recall many important details about her assailant and his truck. She said the truck was a Chevy S10, blue with a dark cap. There was an air freshener with the Tweety Bird cartoon character hanging from the rearview mirror. The interior was muddy with holes in the bench seat. Megan remembered grabbing the truck frame in a desperate attempt to resist her attacker.
She definitely wanted to leave some type of sign or some type of calling card, if you will, that she was there, that this had taken place, just in case she didn't make it out alive.
She also said the back end of the truck may have been dented.
Because when we went down to Boyd's Corner and he turned around, he backed up to the guardrail and he hit the guardrail pretty hard.
Megan described her assailant as a stocky blonde man with facial hair about 6 feet tall with piercing blue eyes. Between his eyes was a crescent-shaped cut caused when Megan struck him with the flashlight.
She kept her eyes open and she looked at his face and his body. So she was able to describe portions of the man that a reasonable stranger wouldn't know.
Forensic scientists measured and photographed the shoe and tire impressions outside the McKernan's home. Several of the shoe impressions belonged to Megan's family, but there were a number of unidentified shoe impressions, presumably those of the assailant. At Boyd's Corner, where the assault took place, police found more tire impressions and scuff marks on a guardrail. Boyd's Corner is an isolated area on an abandoned road leading to a cul-de-sac. Because it was a gathering spot for teenagers, police assumed the assailant was a local man, familiar with the area. The use of a weapon also suggested this wasn't his first crime.
We wanted to make sure that the person who did this to her wasn't out there hunting someone else. So we wanted to make sure the community was aware of the information.
Police appealed to the community for help. A newspaper article appeared 3 days after Megan's assault, asking if anyone recognized the description of the assailant or his truck. That same day, police received an anonymous telephone call.
Jackson Police Department, how may I help you? Jackson Police Department, how may I help you?
An anonymous caller told police where they could find a truck similar to the one they were looking for in the Megan McKernan assault case.
We go to the address that was given to us by the anonymous caller. There's the suspect vehicle. It matches perfectly. It's a blue Chevy truck with a black cap.
The truck was owned by Douglas Bailey.
Thomas, this is Detective Green. Doug, we have a couple.
But police immediately ran into two problems.
Okay.
Bailey didn't match the victim's physical description.
You want to die? Sat in my chair, watching.
And he didn't have the cut on his forehead made by Megan's flashlight.
Is that your truck in the driveway? Yes, sir. Probably take a peek on the way out. Okay.
But then, police saw the Tweety Bird air freshener, the same one Megan had described, hanging from the rear-view mirror. And behind the front seat was a rifle, similar to the one the girls described. Criminalists dusted the truck for fingerprints. They discovered prints on the frame by the passenger door. By using a special adhesive strip, they lifted those prints for analysis.
They were found next to the passenger's door and were in a smeared condition, which would, in my opinion, indicate that someone had been forced into the vehicle or attempted to be forced into the vehicle.
Floria then compared those prints to Megan's, looking specifically for individual ridge characteristics.
No two different people have ever been found to have the same fingerprints. That's based upon the individual ridge characteristics, the bifurcations, the ridge endings, the enclosures, the short ridges, which we find in a known fingerprint.
Megan's fingerprints had the same ridge characteristics and spacing as the fingerprints on the truck.
Those fingerprint impressions were made by the right index finger, the right middle finger, the right ring finger, and the right little finger of Megan McKernan.
With a search warrant, police confiscated a pair of boots from the Bailey home to see if they matched footwear impressions found at the crime scene.
They can be like a fingerprint insofar as they can be individualized as having been made by a specific shoe to the exclusion of all others.
Floria says shoe soles develop tiny cuts from stepping on objects such as glass or stones. These accidental characteristics are unique to each shoe. Using fingerprint dusting powder, Floria covered the sole, then used a sheet of adhesive tape and a roller to create a copy of that sole. Next, Floria compared the size, shape, and accidental characteristics to the footwear impressions lifted from the crime scene. They were a match. Tires also have accidental characteristics like footwear. When the tire impressions from the crime scene were compared to the Bailey's pickup truck tires, They were found to be consistent.
There was a glove that was left at the scene. The other match was inside the vehicle itself.
The truck belonged to Douglas Bailey, but the shoes did not. They belonged to his 28-year-old son, Craig, who had recently been released from prison after serving 7 years of a 25-year sentence for burglary. Doug Bailey wasn't surprised to hear his son might again be in trouble. Craig Bailey was attending alcohol abuse recovery meetings at this local treatment center.
They came out too, the detectives, and said, by the way, Craig's down at an alcohol recovery service, and if you want to go get him, that's where he's at.
And that's just where the police found him.
Without saying a word, he turned around, put his hands behind his back, we handcuffed him and took him out to the car. He never said a word and never questioned us as to why we were there to take him into custody. To me, that was a sure sign of someone who had committed the crime or certainly was guilty of something.
And it wasn't long before police discovered that the anonymous callers were Craig's father, Doug, and his girlfriend. Police suspected 28-year-old Craig Bailey, a career criminal, was the man who kidnapped and assaulted 18-year-old Megan McKernan. Megan's description of her assailant fit Craig Bailey perfectly, even the crescent-shaped cut between his eyes.
Megan selected Craig Bailey out of a photo lineup of 6 people. She did not hesitate when she selected the person that did this crime to her.
Doug Bailey told police that he and Craig were on their way to a movie when Craig stopped to speak with Megan and her sister-in-law, Stephanie.
What about you?
I have a boyfriend.
How old are you?
21.
Later that night, Craig dropped his father off at home and said he was going out to meet some friends. His father had no idea his plan was to return to the girl's house. Despite overwhelming forensic evidence against him, Craig Bailey refused to accept a plea bargain and pleaded not guilty at the preliminary hearing. Meanwhile, investigators worked to strengthen their case against him. Forensic scientist Jennifer Bloink analyzed Megan's rape test kit with a chemical called Brentman's reagent.
If I get a nice, bright purple color change reaction, then I know that I possibly have semen on that swab.
Which is what she found. Bloink also tested the samples with Feta-base tablets, which react when coming into contact with amylase, a digestive enzyme found in saliva.
What a Feta-base tablet is basically a starch that is chemically connected to a dye.
The test turned deep blue, meaning saliva was present. Those samples were subjected to a DQ-alpha DNA test. Test strips analyze 6 specific locations on the DNA strand. Craig Bailey's DNA matched the semen and saliva samples from the rape test kit.
Only one person out of 3,000 people would have the DNA profile that we detected from the semen on the thigh. If all of those individuals happen to be Caucasian.
And finally, a bloodstain found in the pickup truck matched Megan's DNA.
There was a literal mountain of evidence to suggest and to prove that he in fact did commit the crimes of felonious assault, rape, and kidnapping.
Megan's blood inside the truck and her fingerprints positioned in a way that clearly demonstrated she was forced into the vehicle all proved these points to the jury.
The forensics to this case put the icing on the cake. It allowed us to conclusively link the suspect to the scene and to the victim herself.
Craig Bailey was convicted of first-degree kidnapping and rape and 2 counts of felonious assault. He was sentenced to 46 years in prison. Since Bailey was on parole when he committed the crime, the judge reinstated the 18 years remaining on Bailey's previous sentence.
He didn't show any anger, he didn't show any remorse, he didn't show any incredulity. I believe by the time he would get out would be approximately 81 years old.
If it wasn't for Megan, we might not have had a conviction. There could have been a dynamic attorney in there that would have maybe confused or polluted the issue of, was it, a real crime? These girls, he asked him to come back, or just enough to put a little bit of reasonable doubt into the mind of the jury. So it was Megan and her articulation and her conviction and her willingness to survive and make it through that made the case.
Hey, girls.
Investigators say everyone can learn from Megan McKernan's quick thinking and amazing recall.
Leave pieces and parts of whatever you can behind. Ripped clothing, hair, fingernails. Dig in. Have at it. Don't go away and leave us nothing, because what we might find will be just what's left over of you.
A man died in his home after a long history of heart disease. It was assumed that this was the cause of his death. A few weeks after the funeral, rumors surfaced that the death was no accident. When the body was exhumed, scientists needed to know whether the dead could tell tales. On a January night in 1990, a woman called for an ambulance saying her boyfriend was unconscious and barely breathing. Emergency personnel were at the home in Westport, Massachusetts within minutes.
We arrived on the scene, went into the house, and we found a male sitting in a chair, and he was just kind of slumped forward, unresponsive.
The man's girlfriend said he had a long history of heart trouble.
As soon as I took his robe apart, I saw that he had a scar from a past cardiac surgery, which indicated that he had had a bypass surgery at some point in time. And we began CPR.
But the CPR brought no response. 61-year-old Richard Alfredo was pronounced dead an hour later at a nearby hospital. Because of his heart disease, the local medical examiner decided not to perform an autopsy.
Mr. Alfredo had a long history of severe heart disease, which necessitated a surgical correction of his blocked coronary arteries in the heart, a coronary bypass procedure. So at the time of his death, he had every reason to die from his heart disease.
Richard Alfredo was buried 4 days after his death. All of his assets, worth about $25,000, went to his estranged wife and children. Alfredo's girlfriend, 39-year-old Christina Martin, continued to live in the house the couple shared, along with her 2 children from a previous marriage. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until Westport police officer Mike Roussel started hearing rumors.
We heard rumors that Mr. Alfredo's death was due to poisoning, and this was just facts that we couldn't prove at that time. It was just information, and as a police department, we had the obligation to start looking into this.
The rumors emanated from some students at a nearby high school. Richard Alfredo's girlfriend, Christina Martin, had a 14-year-old daughter, Tisha, who attended Westport High School. Tisha allegedly told school friends that Alfredo had made sexual advances towards her on numerous occasions. And she admitted that she and her mother were angry about it.
The teenagers were telling us Miss Martin was trying to locate anything that would take the life of Mr. Alfredo.
Investigators now wondered whether they made a mistake burying the body without an autopsy. Four weeks after Richard Alfredo's death, rumors circulated that his death was no accident. The daughter of Alfredo's girlfriend, Tisha, allegedly told friends that Alfredo had made sexual advances towards her. And she also said that her mother put the drug LSD in Alfredo's gelatin dessert in an effort to kill him.
They made the Jell-O. They made it in 2 separate dishes. They ate Jell-O, but his dish was kept to the side. At that time, they fed him the Jell-O, and then they went out of the house, and they came back, and he was basically dead at that time. They called rescue, and he was transported to St. Luke's Hospital, where he was pronounced dead.
LSD is a powerful hallucinogen known on the street as acid. A dose or hit usually comes in tablets or in liquid soaked into paper. A single drop can cause hallucinations for 6 to 10 hours.
We've been told by people that have taken LSD, you're seeing all kinds of different things, animals running across the room at you, things crawling up the wall, things crawling on you. So, you know, it would have put him in a position where he had no idea what was going on.
And LSD can also cause a rapid increase in heart rate. A local drug dealer admitted selling 30 doses of LSD to a small group, which included Alfredo's girlfriend, Christina, and her daughter, Tisha.
They identified Miss Martin as sitting in the vehicle, and they brought the drugs to her, and they left the area at that time.
During police questioning, Christina denied buying LSD or giving Richard Alfredo any harmful substances.
Miss Martin was trying to locate anything that would take the life of Mr. Alfredo, no matter whether it was some type of a medication or pills, or she even tried to get some of the teenagers to, they would take him out with a weapon. She was going to provide the gun for them, which was Mr. Alfredo's guns.
To see if LSD had caused Alfredo's death, the medical examiner exhumed his body 6 weeks after the funeral. In a living person, LSD leaves the body within 36 hours of use. But in a dead person, the drug can stay indefinitely, although the embalming process can complicate matters.
The process of embalming is such that all the blood in the body is removed and replaced with embalming fluid, a preservative, so that any attempt at trying to find poisons is hampered because there is no blood left in the body.
But they found some other tissue samples to test.
There was some urine, there was some intestinal contents, there were some stomach contents.
The samples were sent to 2 different labs for testing, the state crime lab and another private laboratory. Dr. Louis Amoruso performed the testing at the private lab and used what is called a radioimmunoassay test, or RIA. It's similar to the test used at sporting events to screen athletes for the presence of performance-enhancing drugs. Dr. Amoruso took a sample of LSD, then mixed it with a radioactive compound, then added samples from Alfredo's body. If LSD were present in Alfredo's body, he would have formed antibodies to fight it. Those antibodies will bind to the radioactive LSD sample, producing a positive result. Both the private lab and the police lab found 2 drugs present in Alfredo's system. One was diphenhydramine, a common over-the-counter cold medication. The other was LSD.
The more important compound, as far as we were concerned, was LSD, because there are no prescriptions for LSD, and that would indicate something that would not be found except under illicit conditions.
LSD causes the heart to beat more vigorously. The stresses placed on the very diseased heart caused a fatal heart attack. thereby the cause of death, heart disease, and LSD poisoning.
Richard Alfredo's death was no longer considered an accident. It was now murder, a heart attack brought on by acute LSD intoxication. When police went to arrest Christina Martin and her daughter Tisha, they found that they had both fled the country.
Miss Martin leaving town led us to believe that she definitely had some involvement in his death. That's what made us look even more closely to her, even though we were on that track anyway.
Telephone records indicated they fled to Montreal, where they were apprehended.
Is it true? Did you do it?
Christina Martin was charged with first-degree murder. No charges were filed against her daughter Tisha. At the trial, prosecutors presented the toxicological evidence of LSD in Richard Alfredo's system, and a drug dealer testified that Christina was present when he sold LSD to Tisha's high school friends. That was all the prosecution needed. Christina Martin was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. And that's where the case stood for 7 long years. That is, until it came up for a routine appeal, where Christina's lawyer found something in the case file he wasn't supposed to see. Christina Martin had served 7 years in prison for the murder of her boyfriend, Richard Alfredo, before her case came up for a routine appeal. Christina's new lawyer was a public defender, Kevin Mahoney. His first task was to go to the courthouse to pick up the case file.
While I was standing at the counter waiting for the evidence to be brought to me by the clerk, I struck up a conversation with the gentleman next to me who wound up being an assistant DA. He turns to me and he says, "Counsel, you're representing Miss Martin?" I said, "Yes."
The assistant DA told Mahoney to look very closely at Richard Alfredo's official cause of death.
Well, I was stunned that a prosecutor would make such an admission to me. I definitely took it as a red flag, and this is something I should follow through with.
This was the first murder case Mahoney ever handled, and he read every page of transcript of Christina's first trial, paying particular attention to anything related to how Richard Alfredo had died.
The transcripts were so fascinating, I couldn't put it down. It was like a great novel. At first blush, it seemed that the evidence was overwhelming. And because these toxicologists, these chemists are getting in there and they're testifying that there's massive amounts of LSD, Jesus, it didn't sound good.
But then he came across this document, Richard Alfredo's death certificate, stating the cause of death as acute LSD intoxication. Mahoney made a telephone call to Dr. David Benjamin, a highly respected clinical pharmacologist.
There had never been a case reported where a person had died from the direct effects of LSD. So right away, that allegation was inconsistent with a whole body of scientific information dating back to the mid-60s. That's a 30-year period of time.
And Dr. Benjamin noticed another potential discrepancy. The RIA test was designed to work only on fresh urine samples, which the medical examiner didn't have after the body was autopsied. The labs tested tissue samples and degraded blood, all of which had been embalmed.
I called the manufacturer and I asked, do you have any experience with using this test in samples other than fresh urine, in particular forensic samples obtained from exhumed bodies or from dead people? And they said, absolutely not.
And even if the urine tests positive for LSD, the RIA test is only for screening. Any positive results must then be retested to confirm the results. On the RIA test kit outer box, the manufacturer makes this clear. It states, that all RIA results are preliminary and that a specific alternative must be used to get a confirmed analytical result. Even the scientist who conducted the original RIA test for the prosecution agreed with that assessment.
In order to say with 100% certainty that it was LSD that was present in the body, one would have to go to a confirmatory test. The gold standard, the test that is considered to be the most dependable, is the one that's called gas chromatography mass spectrometry.
For whatever reason, Christina Martin's first lawyer never questioned the test results.
The defense attorney at the trial was so incompetent and his performance was so bad that the judge called him up to sidebar and asked him, "You're not doing very much examination of these witnesses. Is that intentional? Is that deliberate?"
And the attorney tried to reassure the judge and tell him, "Oh, don't worry, it'll all come out in my defense case," but it never did.
If the scientific tests were only preliminary, why wasn't a confirmatory test ever performed? Kevin Mahoney found the answer to that question in the evidence file, information prosecutors never presented at the first trial. Information prosecutors thought would remain a secret. When Kevin Mahoney examined the case file from Christina Martin's first trial, he found an important piece of evidence. It was evidence that prosecutors never presented at the first trial. Prosecutors had commissioned a confirmatory test on Alfredo's tissue samples using a gas chromatograph mass spectrometer. It's a test that can identify every substance in the sample.
That test detected no LSD in any of the samples. Even though they tested and retested, they were desperate to confirm what they had learned from the radioimmunoassay test, but they weren't able to do that.
Mahoney discovered that this exculpatory forensic evidence was not given to Christina Martin's defense attorney before the trial. This violated a legal provision known as the Brady Doctrine.
The Brady Doctrine says that the prosecution has a duty to turn over all exculpatory evidence to the defense without even being asked for it.
In this case, the prosecutor played hide the ball with the exculpatory evidence. The gas chromatography mass spectrometry evidence should have been disclosed to the defense attorney. It never was.
This may explain why an assistant DA told Mahoney to look carefully at the official cause of Richard Alfredo's death. And this new forensic evidence was put before an appeals court judge who was unusually qualified for this particular case.
99 out of 100 judges. Eyes would have just glazed over when they started hearing GC mass spec and all this other stuff. The judge in this case, Judge Gordon Dorfer, was a chemistry major in college. How lucky were we?
In his decision, Judge Dorfer cited defects in the scientific evidence and the prosecution's failure to disclose critical exculpatory evidence as grounds for a new trial. But prosecutors decided not to retry the case. Christina Martin agreed to plead guilty to manslaughter in exchange for a sentence of time served. In other words, Christina Martin was a free woman. Moments after leaving the courtroom, Christina Martin told the press that despite the plea bargain, she had nothing to do with her boyfriend's death.
I pleaded guilty because of the plea bargain and the chance that I might go back to jail. I didn't want that.
I would have liked to have had this woman found not guilty, but this is not the first person in Massachusetts to say they did something in order to get out of being prosecuted. When your feet are being held to the fire, you're going to do things you really don't want to do.
But if Christina Martin was innocent, why did she flee to Canada shortly after Alfredo's death?
She may have had a guilty conscience about some of the things that she was thinking about doing and maybe some of the things that she had done, Plus, there was also the possibility, with her daughter involved, that her daughter might have done some things to this gentleman without her knowledge.
But while science rules out LSD, it reveals another possibility. When Alfredo's body was exhumed, the medical examiner found groundwater in the casket. The water mixed with the embalming fluid may have contaminated the tissue samples.
Basically, LSD has a chemical structure, and that chemical structure is not unique to LSD. There are many substances in the body and in nature in general that possess similar chemical structures. Two of them that we would find in the body would be the amino acid tryptophan and the neurotransmitter serotonin. There are also ergot derivatives that are in the grass and in the ground and in fungi and fungal material that could have been washed into the coffin when all of the water seeped into the coffin.
And the preliminary drug test was supposed to be used on fresh urine samples, not tissue samples. Dr. Benjamin also believes it may have been the cold medicine, diphenhydramine, that Alfredo was taking for his cold that caused his death, since it can increase one's heart rate.
I will tell you what reasonable doubt arose for me, and that was, first of all, nobody dies from LSD. They commit suicide, but they don't have direct toxic effects that lead to death.
The original prosecutor in this case refused all requests for an interview. Officially, prosecutors still maintain that Christina Martin killed Richard Alfredo. Defense experts say LSD has never killed anyone. Today, Richard Alfredo's tombstone is not engraved with the date of his death, perhaps a metaphor for the uncertainty that still exists in this case.
Bad science and bad ethics resulted in Miss Martin being sent to a prison cell. It was good ethics and good science that got her out of the prison cell. So bad science put her in, and good science got her out.
The phone rang at 2:13 in the morning. In a town where almost every light went dark before midnight, a sudden call at that hour meant one thing. Something had happened. But nobody in the small Nevada community of Silver Creek expected what came next. A forgotten case. A name buried in old files. A murder that had haunted families for nearly 3 decades. And an arrest that would reopen every wound the town thought had finally healed. For 29 years, the question remained unanswered. What happened to Claire Whitmore, a young woman who disappeared on a cold November night in 1994? A woman whose last known moments were captured by a security camera outside a gas station. A woman who walked into the darkness and never came home. For years, investigators searched. They followed rumors. They chased false leads. They interviewed people who remembered only fragments. But every road ended the same way. Nowhere. No suspect. No confession. No explanation. Just another name added to Nevada's growing list of cold cases. Until one night, a fingerprint changed everything. Silver Creek was the kind of town where secrets lasted longer than people. Located far from the bright lights of Las Vegas, surrounded by endless desert and empty highways, it was a place where everyone knew everyone's business. The town had one main road, one grocery store, one sheriff's office, and one memory that nobody could forget: the disappearance of Claire Whitmore. In 1994, Claire was 27 years old. She worked as a medical assistant at a small clinic outside town. Friends describe her as determined, quiet, the type of person who noticed details others ignored. She kept journals. She photographed old buildings. She collected stories from people who had lived in Silver Creek for generations. She was fascinated by forgotten things, places abandoned, people overlooked, events nobody wanted to discuss. And that curiosity would eventually lead her into the darkest mystery the town had ever known. On November 18, 1994, Claire finished her shift at approximately 8:45 p.m. Her co-workers remembered that she seemed distracted, not afraid. Not upset, just focused. One nurse later told investigators Claire spent most of the afternoon making phone calls. Nobody knew who she contacted. Nobody knew why. At 9:17 p.m., Claire left the clinic. She was supposed to meet a friend for dinner. She never arrived. At 10:06 p.m., her car was found parked near an abandoned mining road outside Silver Creek. The driver's door was unlocked. Her purse was inside. Her phone was inside. Her jacket was folded neatly on the passenger seat. But Claire was gone. The first officers arriving at the scene believed she had walked away. Maybe she needed time. Maybe she left voluntarily. That assumption would haunt the investigation for years. Because within hours, detectives discovered something strange. Claire would never leave without her camera. It was the one thing she carried everywhere. But the camera was missing. At the time, investigators considered it a minor detail, a personal item. Nothing more. They were wrong. Because inside that camera were images connected to a secret that several people in Silver Creek desperately wanted to remain buried. The first 48 hours after Claire disappeared became a massive search operation. Volunteers walked through the desert. Police searched abandoned buildings. Helicopters scanned the surrounding areas. Dogs followed Claire's scent from her vehicle. But the desert gave nothing back. No clue, no footprints. No sign that Claire had ever left the road. It was as if she had vanished between one moment and the next. Then came the first strange discovery. 3 days after her disappearance, investigators received an anonymous envelope. No return address. No fingerprints. Inside was a single photograph. It showed Claire standing near an old mining structure outside town. The photo had been taken only hours before she disappeared. On the back was one sentence. She found what everyone forgot. Investigators immediately asked the obvious question. Who took the photograph? Nobody knew. Claire's friend denied taking it. Her family denied knowing about it. The camera that could have answered the question was gone. The photograph became the first major mystery of the case. Then another one appeared. A witness came forward. A truck driver named Marcus Hale claimed he saw Claire's car near the mining road that night. But he also claimed something else. He saw another vehicle, a dark sedan, parked behind her. At first, detectives believed this could be the breakthrough they needed. A possible suspect vehicle, a possible witness, a possible explanation. But when they checked the road cameras from that night, the sedan was not there. The only vehicle recorded was Claire's. Marcus Hale later changed his statement. He said he might have been mistaken. The investigators marked him as unreliable. The lead disappeared, and the case began its slow transformation from active investigation into a cold case. Months passed, then years. The file became thicker, but the answers became fewer. Claire's family refused to believe she simply vanished. Her mother continued placing flowers near the mining road every November. Her brother built a small memorial beside the highway. The town remembered, but the investigation stopped moving. By 2000, the case was officially considered inactive. By 2010, most of the original detectives had retired. By 2020, the evidence sat untouched inside an evidence warehouse. Boxes of photographs, old interviews, forgotten reports, a mystery frozen in time, until Detective Elena Vargas arrived. She joined the Nevada Cold Case Unit after 20 years working major crimes. Unlike many investigators who look for new evidence first, she looked at old mistakes. She believed cold cases were not solved because someone suddenly found a magical clue. They were solved because someone finally asked the right question. When Vargas opened Claire Whitmore's file, she noticed something immediately. The investigation had focused entirely on where Claire went. Nobody had focused on what Claire discovered. That changed everything. Vargas reviewed Claire's journals. Hundreds of pages. Most were ordinary. Notes about photographs. Stories from residents. Historical research. But one entry from November 16th, 1994 caught her attention. 2 days before Claire disappeared. The entry was short. Only one sentence. The old mine records prove someone lied. Detective Vargas stopped reading. Old mine records. That phrase appeared nowhere else in the original investigation. She searched the evidence list. There were no mine records, no documents, no files, nothing, which meant one thing. Claire had found something, and someone removed it before police ever saw it. The investigation reopened, and for the first time in nearly 30 years, detectives were no longer searching for a missing woman. They were searching for the secret she died trying to reveal. But nobody expected the next discovery, because hidden inside an old evidence box, under a stack of forgotten photographs, was something that had been overlooked since 1994. A single fingerprint. A print that did not belong to Claire. A print that did not belong to any investigator. A print connected to someone who had never been questioned. And when the identification came back from the laboratory, the entire town of Silver Creek was forced to face a truth it had avoided for decades. The person responsible had been there all along. The fingerprint report arrived at 6:42 in the morning. Detective Elena Vargas had been awake for almost 20 hours. She had spent the entire night inside the cold case office, surrounded by photographs, witness statements, and boxes of evidence that had been untouched for years. But when the laboratory technician placed a file on her desk, everything changed. The report contained only a few pages. A name, a match, a connection nobody expected. The fingerprint recovered from Claire Whitmore's abandoned vehicle belonged to Daniel Mercer. The room went silent, because Daniel Mercer was not a stranger. He was not an unknown criminal hiding somewhere in the desert. He was a familiar face, a respected member of Silver Creek, a man whose name appeared dozens of times in Claire's original investigation, but never as a suspect. Daniel Mercer had been the owner of the mining property where Claire was last seen. He had been interviewed. He had provided statements. He had even helped organize search parties after her disappearance. For nearly 30 years, the town remembered him as one of the people who tried to help find Claire. Now investigators had physical evidence connecting him to her vehicle. The question was immediate. Why? Why was Daniel Mercer's fingerprint inside Claire's car? And why had nobody discovered it in 1994? The answer was buried inside an old evidence report. When Claire's vehicle was processed, investigators collected several fingerprints. Most were incomplete. Some belonged to Claire. Others belonged to people who had searched the vehicle after it was discovered. But one print was marked as unidentified partial. The original detective assigned to the case noted that the fingerprint was too damaged for comparison. Technology in 1994 had limitations. The evidence was stored, forgotten, and eventually buried beneath thousands of other cases, until modern forensic systems reopened the possibility. A fingerprint that had been meaningless for decades suddenly became the strongest clue in the investigation. Detective Vargas immediately pulled Daniel Mercer's background. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. Born in Nevada, local businessman, former mining consultant, community volunteer, no criminal record, no history of violence, a man people trusted. But when investigators looked deeper, they found something strange. Daniel Mercer had changed his story several times during the original investigation. The first interview occurred 2 days after Claire disappeared. He told detectives he had never seen Claire before, but a week later, he admitted they had met. He claimed she visited his property asking about old mining history. Then, months later, he said he barely remembered their conversation. Small changes, small contradictions. Nothing enough to accuse him, but enough to raise questions. Questions nobody asked in 1994. Detective Vargas found another detail. Claire's journal mentioned a meeting with someone who knew the old mining records. The name was missing. The page had been torn out. Only 3 words remained. He knows everything. Investigators believe Claire had been planning to meet someone on the night she disappeared. Now, they had a possible identity. Daniel Mercer, the man who owned the land, the man who knew the records, the man whose fingerprint was found inside her car. The investigation moved quickly. Detectives returned to Mercer's old property, the abandoned mining area where Claire's vehicle had been discovered. For years, the site had been searched, but this time they were looking for something different. Not a body, not physical evidence, a connection. Inside an old storage building, investigators found a hidden room behind a false wall. The room was small, almost impossible to notice. Inside were boxes of documents, old mining reports, financial records, maps, and photographs. Some dated back to the 1960s, others from the weeks before Claire disappeared. The discovery shocked investigators, because among the photographs was one of Claire, taken on November 18, 1994, the night she vanished. She was standing inside the mining building, holding a folder, talking to someone. The image was damaged. The person's face was cut off, but investigators recognized the clothing: a dark jacket, work boots, a silver watch, the same description given by another witness years earlier, a witness whose statement had been dismissed. The witness was an elderly woman named Evelyn Price. In 1994, she told police she saw Claire arguing with a man outside the mine, but detectives considered her unreliable. She was 82 years old. She had poor eyesight. Her statement was ignored. Now, 30 years later, investigators returned to find her. Evelyn was still alive, 91 years old, living in a small retirement community outside Reno. When Detective Vargas showed a photograph, Evelyn immediately recognized a man. She did not hesitate. She simply whispered, "That's him." "Who?" Evelyn looked at the image, then looked at Vargas. Daniel Mercer, the witness who had been ignored for decades, suddenly became the most important person in the investigation. Evelyn revealed something else. She said Claire was not afraid during the argument. She was angry. She heard Claire say, "You promised you would show me the records." Daniel Mercer responded, "You don't understand what you're opening." Those words changed the case, because they suggested Claire and Daniel were not strangers. They knew each other. They had planned a meeting, and Claire believed Daniel had information. But why? What were the records? The answer came from the hidden documents. The mining records revealed something the town had never known. In 1978, the Silver Creek Mining Company reported a major environmental accident. Official records stated it was a minor equipment failure. Nobody was injured. No serious damage occurred. But the hidden documents told a different story. A collapse inside one of the tunnels had trapped workers underground. 3 men died. The company covered it up. The records were altered. The deaths were never reported properly. The families of those workers never received the truth. And Daniel Mercer knew. He had been involved in the cleanup. He had helped hide the evidence. Claire discovered the records. She discovered the names. She discovered that people in Silver Creek had built their lives on a lie. But investigators still needed to understand one thing. Why did Daniel keep the evidence? Why preserve the documents that could destroy him? The answer came from a second hidden file, a letter written by Daniel himself. The letter was dated November 19, 1994, one day after Claire disappeared. It began, "I never wanted this to happen." Detective Vargas read every line. Daniel admitted he knew Claire had discovered the truth. He admitted they met that night. He admitted she demanded the original records. But he denied killing her. He claimed someone else arrived. Someone who knew about the documents. Someone who wanted Claire silenced. A person Daniel described as the man who built this town's secrets. Investigators searched for the identity. Then they found another name. A name hidden inside the old mining records. A name connected to every major decision in Silver Creek for decades. The former company director. The man who controlled the mining operation. The man who had the power to erase evidence. His name was Richard Holloway. And according to the records, he had died in 1997, 3 years after Claire disappeared. But the investigation discovered something impossible. Richard Holloway had not died in 1997. The death certificate was fake. The burial records were incomplete. Someone had created a false ending. And now detectives had one more question. If Richard Holloway was alive, where had he been hiding? Because the answer would reveal the darkest secret Silver Creek had ever kept. For 29 years, Silver Creek believed Richard Holloway was dead. His name was carved into local history. His photograph hung inside old company buildings. His contributions were mentioned at community events. People remembered him as the man who built the mining industry that kept the town alive. A businessman, a leader, a respected figure. But Detective Elena Vargas was beginning to understand something important. In cold cases, the people who appear the most untouchable are often the people nobody looks at closely enough. Richard Holloway was not dead. He had disappeared. And there was a difference. A dead man cannot hide. A living man can. The discovery of the false death records changed the investigation overnight. Detectives reopened every document connected to Holloway. The official story was simple. Richard Holloway suffered a heart attack in 1997. He died at a private hospital outside Reno. His funeral was small. His family requested privacy. No public viewing. No photographs. No questions. At the time, nobody found it unusual. A wealthy businessman. An older man. A private family. But when investigators examined the records again, they found cracks. The hospital listed a doctor who had retired 2 years earlier. The funeral home listed an employee who never worked there. The burial location existed on paper, but no grave could be found. The entire death had been carefully constructed. Someone wanted the world to believe Richard Holloway was gone, and someone had succeeded, until Claire Whitmore's disappearance reopened the past. Detective Vargas gathered every person connected to Holloway. Former employees, business partners, family members. Most claimed they had no idea where he went, but one name appeared repeatedly. A former accountant named Martin Bell. Bell worked for the mining company from 1975 until 1996. He handled finances, parole, internal documents, the kind of information nobody wanted exposed. When investigators found him, he was living quietly in Arizona. He agreed to speak. But before answering any questions, he asked one thing. Did you find photographs? Detective Vargas froze. What photographs? Bell looked away. The ones Claire took. That answer revealed something investigators had not known. Claire's missing camera was never just a personal item. Several people had been searching for it. For years, Bell explained that Richard Holloway knew Claire had evidence. Not just documents. Photographs. Pictures proving the cover-up. Pictures showing meetings. Payments. Hidden agreements. Claire had accidentally captured something much bigger than a mining accident. She had discovered a network. Bell revealed that the mining company had spent decades controlling information. They paid officials, influenced investigations, silenced complaints. But one document was more dangerous than all the others. A financial ledger. A hidden record showing every payment made to keep the secret buried. The ledger had disappeared in 1981, years before Claire vanished. Nobody knew where it went until Claire found it. Detective Vargas returned to the hidden mining room, the place where Daniel Mercer stored documents. She searched through everything again. Then she noticed something. A gap. One empty space on the shelf. A place where a folder had been removed. The label was still visible. Only 2 words remained. Payment records. The ledger was missing. Someone had taken it recently, meaning someone knew investigators were getting close. The cold case was no longer a historical investigation. It was active. Someone was still protecting the truth. That same night, Detective Vargas received a call. No caller identification. No voice. Only a recording. An old voice. Distorted. Almost impossible to recognize. But one sentence was clear. Stop looking for the dead. The recording ended. Then another message arrived. A photograph. A picture of Detective Vargas standing outside the evidence building. Taken earlier that day. Someone had been watching her. The investigation suddenly became personal. The next morning, Vargas requested protection. But she refused to slow down because she now understood the pattern. Every person who got close to the truth received the same warning. Rachel, Emily, Claire, now her. The difference was she was still alive. The search for Richard Holloway intensified. Federal investigators joined the case. They traced financial activity connected to his old companies. The trail went through multiple states: Nevada, Utah, Colorado, Oregon. Everywhere they searched, they found the same thing: a shadow identity, a person moving money, a person buying property, a person living quietly under another name. Then the breakthrough came from a simple document: a vehicle registration, a truck purchased 12 years earlier, registered to a man named Robert Hale. The address was a remote property outside Carson City. The photograph attached to the driver's license showed an older man, gray hair, different appearance. But facial recognition software produced a match: Richard Holloway, alive, living under another name. The man who had supposedly died 27 years earlier was living less than 200 miles from the town where his secrets began. Federal agents surrounded the property before sunrise, but when they entered, Richard Holloway was gone. The house was empty. No furniture, no personal belongings, no photographs, nothing. Except one room, a locked office. Inside were hundreds of files. Newspaper articles about Claire Whitmore, articles about the 1978 mining accident, copies of police reports, photographs of investigators, and one disturbing item: a wall covered with names. Every person connected to the case, every person who knew something, every person who could threaten him. At the center of the wall was one photograph: Claire Whitmore. Underneath her picture were 3 handwritten words: "She knew too much." But the most shocking discovery was hidden inside a desk drawer, a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten confession, not from Richard Holloway, from Daniel Mercer, the man whose fingerprint reopened the case, the man who claimed he was only protecting the truth. The letter revealed that Daniel knew where Claire went after the night she disappeared. He knew because he helped move her, but he insisted he did not kill her. He wrote, "I thought I was saving her." Detective Vargas read the sentence again. Saving her? From whom? The letter continued. Daniel explained that Claire discovered Richard Holloway's operation. She found evidence of decades of corruption, but when she threatened to expose it, Holloway made a decision. He would not let her leave. Daniel said he helped Claire escape. He helped create the illusion that she vanished. He helped hide her identity, because Holloway believed Claire was dead. But Daniel knew the truth. Claire survived. She was taken somewhere safe, somewhere nobody would find her. And then came the final sentence, the sentence that changed the entire case. Claire Whitmore is not missing. Detective Vargas stared at the page. After 29 years, the investigation had its biggest answer, but it created an even bigger question. Where was Claire? And why had she allowed the entire world to believe she was gone? Because if Daniel Mercer was telling the truth, then the woman at the center of Nevada's most mysterious cold case might still be alive. For nearly 3 decades, the people of Silver Creek lived with one painful belief: Claire Whitmore was gone. Her photograph remained on missing person posters. Her name remained inside cold case files. Her family marked every anniversary with the same unanswered question: where did she go? But now, sitting inside a federal evidence room, Detective Elena Vargas stared at a sentence that changed everything. Claire Whitmore is not missing. The words were impossible. After 29 years of searching for a disappearance, investigators were suddenly facing a different kind of mystery. Not a murder, not a kidnapping, a disappearance by choice. But why would Claire abandon her entire life? Why would she allow her mother to die believing she was gone? Why would she let an entire town remember her as another unsolved tragedy? The answer was hidden in Daniel Mercer's confession. But Daniel Mercer was gone. Before investigators could question him, he disappeared. His house was empty. His phone was disconnected. His vehicle was abandoned near a desert highway. It was as if he knew the moment he revealed the truth, someone would come after him. The confession became the most important piece of evidence in the case. But it also raised dozens of new questions. Who helped Claire disappear? Where had she lived? Was Daniel telling the truth? Or was this another carefully created story designed to protect himself? Detective Vargas knew one thing. She needed to find Claire before anyone else did. The search expanded nationwide. Investigators examined decades of records connected to women living under false identities. They searched employment files, property records, tax documents, photography archives, anything connected to someone with Claire's habits, someone who documented forgotten places, someone who searched for hidden histories. Then a name appeared, Lena Cross, a freelance photographer who worked across the western United States. Born in 1967, no childhood records, no family information, no known relatives. A woman who appeared suddenly in 1995, 1 year after Claire vanished. At first, investigators thought it was a coincidence. Then they found the photographs, hundreds of them, abandoned mines, old railroad towns, forgotten industrial sites, the exact subjects Claire had always photographed. Detective Vargas requested copies of Lena Cross's archive work. The first image showed an abandoned building in Utah. The second showed an empty desert road. The third showed an old mining structure. Then came the image that stopped the investigation. A reflection in a window. A woman standing behind the camera. Older, different hairstyle, but unmistakable. Claire Whitmore. Alive. The laboratory confirmed the photograph was taken in 2001, 7 years after her disappearance. The impossible was no longer a theory. Claire survived, but she was still hiding. The question became, who was she hiding from? Investigators traced Lena Cross's movements. She never stayed in one place longer than a few years. Utah, Colorado, Oregon, Washington, always moving, always photographing, always searching through forgotten locations. It was not random. Claire was continuing her investigation. Even after disappearing, she was still looking for something. The answer came from an old interview. A librarian in Oregon remembered Lena Cross. She said Claire visited the archive every year, always asking about the same subject. A mining company from Nevada, the same company connected to Richard Holloway, the same company connected to the hidden documents, the same company connected to her disappearance. The librarian remembered one strange detail. Claire always asked about one missing file, a file called the Holloway Archive. According to old records, the archive contained decades of private company information, financial transactions, secret agreements, names of officials, but it vanished in 1994, the same year Claire disappeared. Detectives realized something. Claire had not been running away. She had been collecting evidence. The disappearance was not the end of the investigation. It was the beginning of a secret investigation that lasted nearly 30 years. The next breakthrough came from a handwritten note found inside Richard Holloway's abandoned office. The note was dated 3 weeks before Claire disappeared. It contained only one paragraph. She found the archive. She understands what it means. If she releases it, everything collapses. The note was unsigned, but the handwriting matched Richard Holloway. It proved he knew Claire was dangerous, but it did not explain one thing. Why was Claire still alive? Detective Vargas returned to Daniel Mercer's confession. She studied every sentence, every detail. Then she noticed something. Daniel never said he saved Claire. He said, "I thought I was saving her." The wording mattered because it suggested Daniel did not know the full truth. Maybe he helped her escape, but maybe someone else controlled what happened afterward. Someone who had been protecting Claire. The investigation turned back to the night of November 18th, 1994, the night Claire disappeared. New technology allowed detectives to enhance old surveillance footage from the gas station near the mining road. The original investigators had reviewed it only briefly. The quality was poor. The footage showed Claire's vehicle passing at 9:42 p.m. Nothing unusual, but modern enhancement revealed something hidden. A second vehicle followed her, a dark sedan, the same type of vehicle Marcus Hale described, the same vehicle investigators dismissed 29 years earlier. The sedan stopped behind Claire's car. A man exited. He approached her. Then something unexpected happened. Claire did not appear afraid. She recognized him. They spoke for several minutes. Then Claire entered the sedan willingly. The vehicle left. Her own car remained behind. For years, investigators believed Claire vanished into the desert. The truth was different. She left with someone she trusted. The question was, who? The image was enhanced. The driver's face was unclear, but one detail was visible. A ring, a silver ring with a distinctive symbol. Detective Vargas immediately recognized it. The same symbol appeared in the hidden mining documents. The same triangle symbol Claire photographed. The symbol of the organization that protected Holloway's secrets. The person driving the car was not a random suspect. He was connected. The investigation moved deeper. The ring symbol led detectives to an old private group known as the Silver Creek Preservation Council. Officially, it was a historical organization. Unofficially, it had controlled local information for decades. Members included business owners, former officials, law enforcement officers, people who had influence, people who could make problems disappear. And one name appeared on every historical membership list. A name nobody expected. A name that shocked Detective Vargas. Because it belonged to someone who had helped investigate Claire's disappearance in 1994. Former Sheriff Thomas Reed, the man who led the original search. The man who assured the public Claire would be found. The man who never mentioned the hidden evidence. The man who had spent decades criticizing the failure of the investigation. Now detectives discovered something terrifying. Thomas Reed was not investigating the secret. He was protecting it. And when investigators searched his old records, they found a final clue. A photograph taken in 1995, 1 year after Claire disappeared. The image showed Thomas Reed standing outside a cabin. Beside him was Claire Whitmore, alive. The cold case that shocked Nevada for 29 years had just revealed its darkest truth. The person who promised to find Claire had known exactly where she was. The photograph sat on Detective Elena Vargas' desk for almost an hour. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Because there was no reasonable explanation. Former Sheriff Thomas Reed had spent 29 years telling the people of Silver Creek that Claire Whitmore vanished without a trace. He stood in front of cameras. He spoke at community meetings. He promised Claire's family that the truth would eventually come out. But the photograph proved something impossible. Thomas Reed had seen Claire alive, not years later, not by accident. 1 year after her disappearance, standing beside her, at a remote cabin hidden in the Nevada wilderness, the man who led the search was part of the secret. The investigation immediately changed direction. Thomas Reed was no longer a witness. He was a person of interest. Detectives reviewed every statement he gave in 1994, every interview, every press conference, every decision. And suddenly, details that seemed insignificant became impossible to ignore. 3 days after Claire disappeared, Reed announced that investigators believed she likely left voluntarily. At the time, the statement surprised many people. The evidence did not support it. Claire left behind her belongings, her vehicle, her personal items, her entire life. Yet Reed pushed the theory anyway. Now investigators understood why. He already knew Claire was alive. He already knew she had disappeared by choice. And he knew exactly who helped her. The next step was finding Thomas Reed. But that proved difficult. After retiring from law enforcement, Reed moved frequently. Nevada, Arizona, Utah. He avoided attention. He rarely appeared in public. He gave no interviews. He refused to discuss the Claire Whitmore case. For decades, people assumed he simply wanted privacy. Now detectives believed he was protecting himself. The search finally led investigators to a small property outside Ely, Nevada, a place registered under a different name. A quiet house surrounded by desert. No neighbors nearby. No security cameras. No signs of unusual activity. But inside, investigators found the past. Boxes of files, old photographs, personal journals, and dozens of pages connected to Claire. Thomas Reed had kept his own archive. He had never forgotten the case. He had preserved it. Inside one folder was a handwritten timeline, not an official police report, a private record. The first line read, "Claire knows too much." The entries continued. Thomas Reed documented every major moment after Claire disappeared, where she moved, who helped her, who contacted her, who searched for her. It was not the record of an investigator. It was a record of someone managing a secret. Then detectives found a photograph, the same cabin from the image, but this one was different. It showed 3 people, Claire, Thomas Reed, and Richard Holloway, the man who was supposed to be dead, the man who controlled the mining operation, the man investigators believed was behind the entire conspiracy. All 3 were alive. All 3 were together. The date on the photograph changed everything. March 1995. For months after Claire vanished. The disappearance was not a random event. It was a planned operation. But why would a sheriff help hide the person he was supposed to find? The answer was buried in Thomas Reed's journal. He wrote about the Silver Creek Preservation Council, the secret organization connected to the mining company. According to Reed, the council had existed for decades. Its purpose was simple: control. They controlled information. They controlled investigations. They controlled the people who could expose them. But Reed also revealed something unexpected. He was not a founding member. He joined because he was afraid. In the late 1980s, Reed discovered that several old cases had been manipulated, missing evidence, changed statements, lost reports. He tried to investigate. Instead, he was threatened. The council showed him what happened to people who challenged them. His career could disappear. His family could become targets. His reputation could be destroyed. So Reed made a choice. He stayed inside. He watched. He waited. And when Claire discovered the truth, he faced the same decision again. Protect the system, or protect the person who found it. The journal revealed that Reed chose Claire, but not because he was a hero, because he knew what would happen if Holloway controlled her. He believed the only way to keep Claire alive was to make everyone believe she was dead, including her family, including the public, including investigators. It was a terrible choice, but Reed believed it was the only one. The problem was, he never told anyone, not even Claire's family. Detective Vargas struggled with the discovery because the truth was no longer simple. The people involved were not just criminals and victims. They were people making impossible choices, people hiding secrets, people trying to survive. But one question remained unanswered. Where was Claire now? The photograph proved she survived in 1995. The records proved she lived under another name. But after 2001, she disappeared again. The trail ended until investigators found a final clue inside Thomas Reed's house. A small notebook hidden beneath a floorboard. The last entry was dated only 6 months earlier. Thomas Reed had continued tracking Claire, even after 20 years. The entry read, "She is preparing to return." Detective Vargas stared at the words, "Return." Not contact. Not reveal. Return. The next pages contained coordinates. A location in northern Nevada. An abandoned research station. A place that once belonged to the mining company. Investigators arrived before sunrise. The building had been empty for years. Dust covered the floors. The windows were broken. The rooms were abandoned. But inside one office, they found something impossible. Fresh photographs. Recent documents. A computer. Someone had been living there. Someone had been waiting. The computer contained hundreds of files. Research about Silver Creek. the mining company, the Preservation Council, and one folder labeled The Final Release. Inside were scanned documents, photographs, recordings, everything Claire had collected over 30 years, the evidence she disappeared to protect. But there was one more file, a video, recorded only days earlier. Detectives pressed play. The screen showed an older woman sitting in a dark room, gray hair, tired eyes, but unmistakably familiar. Claire Whitmore, alive. Older, but alive. For the first time in 29 years, the missing woman spoke. Her voice was calm, but the first words she said shocked investigators. "My name is Claire Whitmore." A pause. "I know everyone believes I disappeared." She looked directly into the camera, but the truth is, I was never trying to escape. The screen went silent for a moment. Then Claire said the sentence that changed the entire case. "I was trying to survive long enough to expose the people who made me disappear." Detective Vargas watched the video again and again, because Claire's confession created the final mystery. She was not hiding anymore. She was ready to reveal everything. But before she could release the evidence, one thing happened. The video ended with a warning recorded by Claire herself. "If you are watching this," a pause, "then they already know I came back." And in the final seconds of the recording, Claire looked away from the camera. Someone had entered the room. Her expression changed. Fear appeared for the first time. Then the screen went black. The cold case was no longer about finding Claire Whitmore. She had been found. Now investigators had to answer the question that had haunted Silver Creek for nearly 3 decades. Who was trying to stop her from finally telling the truth? The video ended at 3:17 in the morning. The screen went black. But nobody inside the investigation room moved. Because for the first time in 29 years, Claire Whitmore was no longer a photograph on a missing poster. She was a living person. A person who had survived. A person who had carried a secret across decades. And a person who was still afraid. Detective Elena Vargas watched the final seconds again. Claire looking toward the door. The sudden change in her expression. The fear. The silence. Then nothing. Who entered the room? Who was she afraid of? And most importantly, where was Claire now? The research station was searched immediately. Every room. Every hallway. Every hidden space. But Claire was gone. The evidence remained. The computer remained. The documents remained. But the person who created the entire investigation had disappeared again. This time, detectives were determined not to lose her. The search began with the video itself. The file contained hidden metadata, a location, a timestamp, a device ID. The recording had been created inside the abandoned research station, only 6 hours before investigators arrived, meaning Claire had been there. Recently. Very recently. But someone else had been there too. The security system inside the building showed a second entrance. A door opened 12 minutes after Claire began recording. A person entered. The camera angle was poor. The face was hidden. But the movement was familiar. Slow. Controlled. Someone who knew the building. Someone who knew where the cameras were. Investigators compared the figure with old photographs. Then they noticed something. The same silver ring. The same symbol. The same mark connected to the Silver Creek Preservation Council. The organization that had protected the secret for decades. The organization that had erased records, controlled information, destroyed evidence, and possibly killed to keep the truth hidden. The investigation expanded again. Agents began searching through the remaining members of the council. Most were elderly. Some were dead. Some claimed they knew nothing. But one name appeared more often than any other. Victor Langley, a former state official, a businessman, a man who had served on multiple community boards, a man whose influence reached far beyond Silver Creek. He had been mentioned only once in the original investigation, a minor interview, a brief conversation, then forgotten. But now investigators found something disturbing. Victor Langley had purchased property near the mining area in 1994. The same year, Claire disappeared. He had also made several large payments to Richard Holloway, payments hidden through shell companies, money that had never been investigated. Detective Vargas realized something. Richard Holloway was not the top of the operation. He was only one piece. Someone else had been directing everything. Someone with political power. Someone who could erase records. Someone who could make a person disappear. Victor Langley. The name shocked Silver Creek, because, unlike Holloway, Langley never lived like a criminal. He lived like a respected citizen. He attended charity events. He gave speeches. He donated money to schools. People trusted him. That was exactly why he was dangerous. The investigation moved quickly. Federal agents reviewed decades of financial records. The pattern became clear. Money moved from mining companies to private organizations, to officials, to people responsible for controlling investigations. The system had been built carefully, not through violence alone, through influence, through favors, through silence. Claire had discovered the structure, and once she understood it, she knew she could not simply expose one person. She had to expose everyone. That was why she disappeared. That was why she waited. The evidence she collected was not a single document. It was an entire history, a record of how a small Nevada town had been controlled for generations. But investigators still needed Claire's testimony. Without her, the evidence was powerful, but incomplete. Then another message arrived. This time, it was not anonymous. It was from an encrypted email account. The sender wrote only, "I know where Claire is." Attached was a photograph, a recent photograph. Claire standing outside a small cabin, alive. The location was hidden. But the image contained one clue, a mountain range in the background. Experts identified it as the Ruby Mountains, northern Nevada, a remote region with hundreds of abandoned properties. The search began immediately, but before agents could reach the area, Victor Langley disappeared. His house was empty. His phone was turned off. His bank accounts frozen. He had vanished within hours of investigators connecting him to the case. The timing was impossible to ignore. Someone had warned him. Someone inside the investigation. The discovery created panic, because after 29 years, the same thing was happening again. Information was leaking. People were still protecting the secret. Detective Vargas became convinced there was another person inside law enforcement, someone who had access to the investigation, someone helping the people responsible. The team reviewed every person who had touched the case, every officer, every analyst, every official. Then they found something strange, a name appearing in multiple evidence transfers, a person who had handled Claire's original file, a person who approved evidence storage, a person who had access to the unidentified fingerprint in 1994, former evidence technician, Samuel Ortega. At first, Ortega seemed impossible. He was retired. He had no criminal history. He lived quietly with his family. But investigators discovered he had been receiving payments from a private company connected to Victor Langley for years. The payment stopped only after the case reopened. Detectives brought Ortega in for questioning. At first, he denied everything. Then Vargas placed the old fingerprint report on the table. "The print was never lost," she said. Ortega looked down. "You hid it." Silence. For several seconds, Ortega said nothing. Then he whispered, "I was told it had to disappear." "Who told you?" Ortega looked terrified. Not guilty. Terrified, because he knew the answer, but he was afraid to say it. Finally he spoke. "Victor Langley." The confession confirmed what investigators suspected, but Ortega revealed something even more shocking. Langley did not order Claire's disappearance. He ordered something else. A cleanup. After Claire discovered the archive, Langley wanted every piece of evidence destroyed. Every photograph. Every document. Every witness. But one person refused. Thomas Reed, the sheriff who secretly helped Claire escape. The man who protected her. The man who carried the guilt for decades. Ortega revealed one final detail. the night Claire disappeared. She was not alone. There were 4 people at the mining site: Claire, Daniel Mercer, Thomas Reed, and Victor Langley. A confrontation happened. Claire threatened to release everything. Langley threatened to destroy her. And then Thomas Reed made a decision. He pointed his weapon at Langley. He told him, "If you touch her this instant," that moment created a fracture. The conspiracy started collapsing. But before anyone could act, Claire vanished. Not because Langley took her, because Reed helped her escape. But the question remained: who was the person who entered the research station? Who was the person wearing the silver ring? Because investigators discovered something that changed everything. Victor Langley was not wearing that ring. Richard Holloway was dead. Thomas Reed was dead. Daniel Mercer was missing, which meant the person hunting Claire was someone new, someone who inherited the secret, someone who wanted the truth buried forever. And as investigators moved closer to the Ruby Mountains, they discovered another message left behind by Claire. Only 4 words, written on the wall of an abandoned cabin. The truth survives everything. But beneath it, another sentence had been added, not by Claire, by someone else. A warning. Not if she does. The words painted on the cabin wall remain visible under the flashlight beam. Not if she does. 4 words. A threat. A promise. A warning. Detective Elena Vargas stood inside the abandoned cabin in the Ruby Mountains, staring at the message left behind. For 29 years, Claire Whitmore had survived by staying invisible, changing names, changing locations, leaving behind every connection she created. But now she had returned. She had collected the evidence. She had recorded her confession. She was ready to expose everything. And someone wanted to make sure she never got the chance. The search team moved through the cabin carefully. The place looked abandoned. Dust covered the floor. Old furniture sat untouched. The fireplace was cold. But investigators noticed something immediately. Someone had been there recently. A coffee cup on the table. A blanket folded on a chair. A half-empty bottle of water. Claire had been living there, and she had not left voluntarily. Inside a small bedroom, investigators discovered another hidden compartment. Behind a wooden panel was a metal case. Inside were dozens of documents, more photographs, more recordings, and one envelope marked with a date. November 18th, 1994. The night Claire disappeared. Detective Vargas opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter. Claire's handwriting. The first line read, "If you are reading this, then the people I feared finally found me." The letter revealed details Claire had never told anyone. After leaving Silver Creek in 1994, she spent years moving from place to place. Not because she was afraid of the public. Not because she wanted to abandon her family. Because she believed the people protecting the secret were everywhere. She wrote about investigators she could not trust. Officials she could not approach. People who appeared helpful but were connected behind the scenes. Claire explained that she learned a dangerous lesson. The truth itself was not enough. Evidence could disappear. Witnesses could disappear. Even people could disappear. She needed undeniable proof. Something nobody could erase. That became her mission. For almost 3 decades, Claire collected everything. Every hidden transaction. Every secret agreement. Every name connected to the Silver Creek Preservation Council. The letter contained one final warning. The council was not destroyed. It survived. It changed. New members replaced old ones. New people inherited the secrets. And one person had taken control. The letter named him. Nathan Holloway. Richard Holloway Esson. The next generation. The person investigators had not considered. Nathan Holloway had spent his entire life away from public attention. Unlike his father, he avoided politics, avoided business, avoided recognition. He built a quiet career managing private investments. But investigators discovered something disturbing. After Richard Holloway's disappearance, Nathan inherited control of several hidden accounts. The same accounts used to move money connected to the mining company. The same financial network that protected the conspiracy. The secret did not die with Richard. It passed to his son. Detective Vargas immediately ordered a search. But Nathan Holloway was already gone. His home had been abandoned. His office had been cleared. His computers were missing. Someone had warned him too. The investigation was now moving against the clock, because investigators realized something terrifying. Nathan was not trying to hide the past. He was trying to finish what his father started. The team returned to Claire's documents. One file stood out. The final names. Inside were photographs of people connected to the council. Some were dead. Some were elderly. Some were still active in business. But one name shocked everyone. A current government official. A person who had publicly supported reopening the Claire Whitmore investigation. A person who appeared to be helping. The name was Commissioner Alan Pierce. The same official who had authorized additional funding for the cold case unit. The same person who praised Detective Vargas publicly. The same person who promised Silver Creek that justice would finally come. Now evidence suggested he had been part of the system protecting the secret. Detective Vargas felt betrayed, because the investigation was no longer about finding criminals from the past. It was about discovering who was still protecting them in the present. Commissioner Pierce was questioned immediately. He denied everything. He claimed Claire's documents were fabricated. He claimed Nathan Holloway was responsible. He claimed he was being framed. But investigators found something inside his office. A photograph. Old. Faded. Taken in 1995. The same cabin. The same location. The same secret meeting. In the photograph were 3 people. Nathan Holloway, Victor Langley, and Commissioner Alan Pierce. The 3 men standing together, planning something. The photograph destroyed Pierce's story. But it also revealed a bigger problem. The conspiracy had never been controlled by one person. It was a network, a chain. One person protected another. One secret protected another. And every person who knew too much became part of the machine. Then came the discovery that changed the case again. A forensic team analyzing Claire's original photographs found something hidden. A reflection in one image taken before her disappearance. At first, investigators believed it showed a random figure, but enhanced analysis revealed the face. A younger Nathan Holloway. He had been there in 1994. He was not just someone who inherited the secret. He was present when everything began collapsing. The investigation timeline changed. Nathan was not cleaning up his father's mistakes. He was protecting his own. The evidence suggested Nathan knew about Claire before she disappeared. Maybe even before Richard Holloway. Detective Vargas returned to Claire's original journal, the pages she had previously ignored. One entry from October 1994 subtly became important. Claire wrote, "Someone younger is watching. Someone who thinks the old rules belong to him." At the time, investigators assumed she meant a random person. Now they knew she meant Nathan Holloway. The person who followed the conspiracy into a new generation. The person who had spent years protecting the family name. The person who wanted Claire silent. The search for Nathan intensified. Then investigators received a message. A voicemail from an unknown number. Claire's voice. Weak, quiet, but alive. She said only, "Don't trust the person who finds me." The message ended. Detective Vargas listened again. The meaning was clear. Someone would eventually claim they found Claire. Someone would appear to save her. But Claire believed that person could not be trusted. The question became, who had Claire contacted before disappearing? Who knew where she was? And who was trying to control the final evidence? Then investigators discovered one final piece of information. The voicemail had not been sent from Nevada. It came from inside Silver Creek, from a building that should have been empty, the old sheriff's office, the same place where the original investigation began, the same place where Claire's case had been buried for decades. Detectives arrived within minutes. The building was dark. The doors were locked. But inside, a light was still on. On the desk sat a single folder. No name. No label. Only one sentence written across the front. The person you are looking for has been beside you the entire time. And underneath, a fingerprint. A fresh fingerprint. One that belonged to someone investigators trusted. The fingerprint on the folder changed the entire investigation. For 29 years, investigators had searched for the person who made Claire Whitmore disappear. They searched abandoned mines, hidden records, fake identities, secret organizations. They searched for a stranger hiding in the shadows. But now the evidence suggested something far more disturbing. The person they were looking for had never been hiding. They had been standing close, watching, helping, guiding the investigation. Detective Elena Vargas stared at the fingerprint report. The laboratory technician placed the results on the table. The room became silent because the name attached to the print was not Nathan Holloway, not Victor Langley, not anyone connected to the old mining company. The fingerprint belonged to Detective Elena Vargas. For several seconds, nobody understood. Then the confusion turned into suspicion. How could her fingerprint be on the folder? She had never touched it. She had never entered the old sheriff's office alone. The evidence was impossible. Unless someone wanted it to look impossible. Unless someone was trying to frame her. But there was another problem. The fingerprint was not the only thing found on the folder. Inside were documents. Hundreds of pages. All related to the investigation, including private reports that only members of the cold case team had access to. Someone inside the investigation was leaking information. Someone had access. Someone knew every move before it happened. The case had become a trap. Detective Vargas immediately removed herself from handling evidence. She understood what was happening. The person protecting the conspiracy was not just watching from outside. They were inside the system. The investigation team reviewed every person involved, every officer, every analyst, every administrator. Then they found something strange. A name appeared in the access logs repeatedly. A person who had reviewed the case files before anyone else. A person who requested old evidence. A person who knew about the hidden research station. A person who knew about Claire's video. The name was Deputy Aaron Mills. At first, nobody believed it. Mills had been assigned to the cold case unit 6 months earlier. He was young, dedicated, known as one of the most hard-working investigators in the department. He helped locate witnesses. He organized evidence. He supported Vargas throughout the investigation. But investigators discovered something hidden. Before joining the department, Aaron Mills worked as a private security contractor. One of his clients? A company owned by Nathan Holloway. The connection was small, but enough. Detectives brought Mills in for questioning. At first, he appeared calm. He answered every question. He denied knowing Nathan. He denied accessing restricted files. He denied everything. Then Detective Vargas placed the fingerprint evidence on the table. Mills looked at it, and for the first time, his expression changed. Fear. Vargas noticed immediately. You know what this means. Mills said nothing. You know who placed that folder there. Silence. Then Mills whispered, You're looking at the wrong enemy. The room went quiet. Vargas leaned forward. Then tell me who it is. Mills looked toward the door, as if checking whether someone was listening. Then he said, Nathan Holloway is not running this. A pause. He never was. The investigation took another unexpected turn. Mills revealed that Nathan Holloway inherited the organization, but he did not create it. The Silver Creek Preservation Council existed long before Richard Holloway, long before the mining company, long before Claire discovered the archive. According to Mills, the council had one purpose: to protect powerful people from consequences. They were not loyal to a company. They were loyal to control. Every generation had someone who inherited the secrets. Richard Holloway, then Nathan. But above them, there was another position, a person known only as the Keeper. The person who preserved the information, the person who decided what disappeared, the person who controlled the council from shadows. Detective Vargas asked the question everyone had been avoiding. Who was the keeper? Mills hesitated. Then he opened a file. Inside was a photograph, an old photograph, taken in 1994. The same night, Claire disappeared. In the image were several people standing outside the mining facility. Richard Holloway, Victor Langley, Thomas Reed, Daniel Mercer, and one more person, a person whose face had been covered in every previous copy. Someone had deliberately removed him, but Mills had recovered the original. The image was clear. The person standing beside the group was James Whitmore, Claire's father. The room went silent because Claire's own family was connected. For decades, everyone believed Claire was fighting against a conspiracy that destroyed her life. But the evidence suggested something much more complicated. Her father may have been part of it. Detective Vargas investigated immediately. James Whitmore had died years before Claire disappeared. He was remembered as a hard-working engineer, a loving father, a respected member of the community. But hidden records revealed another side. Before his death, James worked with the mining company. He helped design safety systems. He reviewed accident reports. He knew about the 1978 collapse. He knew workers died. And according to the documents, he helped hide it. Claire had spent her entire life searching for the truth about a secret connected to her own family. The discovery explained why she was so determined, why she could not let it go. She was not just exposing strangers. She was confronting the legacy of her own father. But one question remained. Did James Whitmore know about conspiracy? Or was he another person trapped inside it? Mills revealed the final secret. James Whitmore tried to expose the mining company years earlier. He changed his mind after threats. He cooperated. But before his death, he left something behind. A message for Claire. Something she never received. A hidden letter. The letter was found inside the same research archive Claire spent decades searching for. The handwriting was old, faded, but the words were clear. Claire, if you ever discover the truth, you will hate me. The letter continued. James admitted his mistakes. He admitted helping hide the accident, but he also revealed why. He believed exposing the truth would cause more deaths. The people involved were too powerful, too connected. He chose silence, and that decision haunted him until the end. But the final paragraph changed everything. James wrote, "The person you should fear is not the one who committed the crime." A pause. "It is the one who decides which crimes are remembered." Detective Vargas understood. The keeper, the person controlling the story, the person who decided what the world knew. The investigation had finally reached the center. But then another message arrived, this time from Claire. A live transmission. She was no longer hiding. Her voice came through the speakers. "Elena." The detective froze. Claire knew her name. "I know you found the letter." A pause. "I know you found a photograph." Another pause. "But there is something you still don't understand." The audio crackled. Then Claire said the words that changed everything. "The keeper is not protecting the past." Silence. "The keeper is protecting what happens next." The transmission ended, and seconds later, every screen inside the investigation office went black. The files disappeared. The evidence servers were erased. The entire case database vanished. Someone had entered the system. Someone with access. Someone powerful enough to destroy 29 years of evidence in seconds. And Detective Vargas finally understood. They were not chasing someone trying to hide history. They were chasing someone preparing to create a new one. The screens went black at exactly 4:08 in the morning. Every monitor inside the cold case division shut down at the same time. No warning. No error message. No chance to save anything. 29 years of investigation. Thousands of documents. Witness interviews. Photographs. Evidence reports. Everything disappeared. For a few seconds, nobody moved. The room that had been filled with voices became completely silent. Then the alarm started. The system had been breached. Not from outside. From inside. Someone had used authorized credentials. Someone who knew exactly where the files were stored. Someone who understood how the investigation worked. Detective Elena Vargas looked around the room. The answer was becoming impossible to ignore. The enemy was not watching them. The enemy was among them. The attack forced investigators to rebuild the case manually. Fortunately, Vargas had learned one important lesson from studying Claire Whitmore. Never trust a single copy of the truth. Claire spent 29 years creating backups, hidden drives, printed documents, physical evidence. She knew digital records could disappear. She knew information could be erased with a few commands. That was why she survived. That was why the truth survived. But the attack revealed something more dangerous. The person behind it was not trying to hide the evidence. They were trying to destroy the final chapter. The chapter Claire was preparing to reveal. Investigators recovered fragments from the damaged system. One file remained. A message from Claire. The title was simple. The Final Statement. Detective Vargas opened it. The video showed Claire sitting in the same room from her previous recording. But this time, she looked different. Older, tired, but calm. She looked directly into the camera. I know you are close. A pause. I know they're trying to stop this. She placed several documents on the table. The truth about Silver Creek was never just about money. She lifted one file. It was about power. Claire explained that the mining accident in 1978 was only the beginning. The accident created the first cover-up, but the people involved discovered something important. A community could be controlled without fear. All they needed was dependence, jobs, money, influence. They built a system where people protected the secret because their lives depended on it. Employees stayed quiet. Officials looked away. Investigators followed orders. The town itself became part of the cover-up. Claire continued, the worst secrets are not hidden because someone protects them. They are hidden because everyone benefits from forgetting. The video then revealed the final piece. The keeper was not one person. It was a role. A position passed from one generation to the next. A person chosen to maintain control. Richard Holloway inherited it, then Nathan Holloway. But before them, someone else held the position. Someone who created the system. The original keeper. Claire looked down at the documents, then said the name, William Whitmore. Her grandfather. The revelation shocked investigators. Claire's family had been connected to the secret from the beginning. Her grandfather helped build the foundation of the system. Her father continued it. And Claire spent her entire life trying to destroy what her family created. But there was one detail that made everything more complicated. Claire explained that William Whitmore eventually regretted what he built. He realized the system had become something uncontrollable. The people who inherited the role became more ruthless, more powerful, more willing to destroy anyone who threatened them. William tried to dismantle the organization. That was why he disappeared from public life. That was why the records were hidden. But before he died, he left instructions. A final archive. The Holloway Archive. The archive Claire spent decades searching for. The archive was not just evidence. It was a weapon, because inside it was proof of every person involved. Every payment. Every decision. Every order. But Claire revealed something terrifying. The archive had never been hidden. It had been protected by someone unexpected, someone who appeared to be helping her. Detective Vargas immediately knew there was only one person who fit, someone with access, someone who knew where Claire was, someone who knew the investigation, someone who had been guiding them. Deputy Aaron Mills, the young investigator who revealed the keeper, the man who claimed he was helping expose the conspiracy. The man who had access to everything. Investigators rushed to find him. His office was empty. His apartment was empty. His phone was abandoned. But unlike everyone else who disappeared, Mills left something behind. A note. Only one sentence. I was never trying to stop Claire. Detective Vargas read the message again. Then she noticed another line written beneath it. I was trying to stop her from trusting the wrong person. The note contained coordinates. A location outside Silver Creek. An old communication tower. The same place where council members supposedly exchanged information. Investigators arrived before sunrise. The tower had been abandoned for years. Inside, they found equipment, old computers, communication devices, files, and a hidden room. Inside the room was a final archive, the evidence Claire had spent decades collecting. But there was something else. A chair, a table, a recording device. Someone had been waiting there. The investigators searched the room, then found a recent photograph, taken only days earlier. The image showed Claire, sitting in that chair, talking to someone. The person facing her was partially hidden, but investigators recognized one thing: the silver ring, the symbol, the mark of the council, the person Claire feared, the person who found her, the person who entered the research station, the person who erased the files, was finally visible. The photograph was enhanced. The face became clearer. Detective Vargas stared, because the person in the image was someone she had trusted from the beginning, someone who had stood beside her, someone who had helped solve the case, someone who had never been considered a suspect. The person wearing the silver ring was Commissioner Alan Pierce, the same official who reopened the investigation, the same man who promised justice, the same man who publicly supported Claire's return. He was not trying to expose the truth. He was trying to control it. But before investigators could arrest him, they received one final message. From Claire, her voice was barely audible. Elena, a pause. He knows you found the archive. The recording continued. He's not running. Silence. He's coming for it. Then Claire whispered the words that sent investigators racing back to Silver Creek. The keeper never leaves a story. The message ended, and when Detective Vargas looked toward the town below, she saw something impossible. A convoy of vehicles entering Silver Creek, police vehicles, government vehicles, and at the front, Commissioner Alan Pierce, driving toward the evidence, driving toward the archive, driving toward the final battle over the truth that had been buried for 29 years. The convoy entered Silver Creek just before sunrise. The desert sky was still dark. The streets were empty. Detective Elena Vargas watched from the second floor of the old sheriff's office. Below her, vehicles stopped one by one. Government plates, private security, official cars, and at the center of it all, Commissioner Alan Pierce, the man who promised justice, the man who reopened the investigation, the man who stood beside Claire's supporters and told the town that the truth would finally be revealed. Now he was arriving before investigators could secure the evidence, before the public could see it, before anyone could stop him. Vargas understood immediately. Pierce was not coming to negotiate. He was coming to control the ending. The archive was no longer just a collection of documents. It was proof of decades of corruption. It contained names, payments, orders, connections, people who built their careers by hiding the truth. And Pierce knew exactly what would happen if the world saw it. Everything would collapse. The team inside the sheriff's office moved quickly. The archive was transferred into protective custody. Digital copies were created. Multiple backups were sent to federal investigators. Claire's greatest lesson had become their greatest advantage. The truth could not exist in one place anymore. It had to exist everywhere. Outside, Commissioner Pierce entered the building. Calm, confident, almost relaxed. He did not look like a man caught in a conspiracy. He looked like someone arriving at work. That was what made him dangerous. He believed he was still in control. Pierce walked through the old sheriff's office and looked around. The place had changed little since 1994. The same hallway, the same evidence rooms, the same walls where Claire's missing posters once hung. He stopped in front of a faded photograph. Claire Whitmore, young, smiling. Before everything changed, then Pierce spoke. She was always stubborn. Nobody answered. Detective Vargas stepped forward. You know where she is. Pierce looked at her. A small smile appeared. You finally understand. The room became silent. You spent all this time looking for a killer. He looked around. But this was never about killing Claire. Vargas watched carefully. Then what was it about? Pierce looked toward the evidence boxes. Control. The word hung in the air. Pierce admitted he knew about Claire's investigation from the beginning. He knew she found the mining records. He knew she discovered the Holloway archive. He knew she was getting closer. But he claimed he never wanted her dead. He wanted her contained. Because Claire had one weakness. She believed the truth could fix everything. Pierce believed the opposite. He believed the truth destroyed everything. Families, communities, institutions. He believed people needed carefully managed stories, not reality. Vargas listened. But she noticed something. Pierce was not defending himself. He was explaining himself, like he truly believed he was right. That was the most disturbing part. He did not see himself as a criminal. He saw himself as a protector, a person making difficult decisions. The same excuse used by every person before him. Richard Holloway, Victor Langley, the old council members. All of them believed they were protecting something. But what they protected was power. Then Vargas asked the question that mattered. Where is Claire? For the first time, Pierce's expression changed. A small hesitation. A moment of uncertainty. And Vargas noticed. Because Pierce knew. He knew exactly where Claire was. Before he could answer, every phone inside the building received a message. A video file. From Claire. Everyone stopped. The screen opened. Claire appeared again. But this time, she was not alone. Standing beside her was Deputy Aaron Mills, the man everyone thought had betrayed the investigation, the man everyone suspected. But now the truth was different. Mills looked directly into the camera. My entire career was built around finding the people who disappear. He paused. But I learned something. He looked at Claire. Sometimes people disappear because the world is not ready to hear why. Claire continued. She explained that Aaron Mills had been helping her for years, not protecting the conspiracy, destroying it. He infiltrated the remaining network. He tracked the new members. He gathered evidence. He helped Detective Vargas because he knew she was the first investigator in decades who truly wanted the truth. The fingerprint, the folder, the leaks, all of it was part of a larger plan. Mills had been trying to identify the remaining members of the council, but there was one person he could never prove, Alan Pierce. Until now, Claire looked into the camera. Alan believes he owns the truth. A pause. He believes controlling information means controlling reality. She shook her head, but he made the same mistake everyone before him made. He underestimated people who remember. The video revealed the final archive location, not the evidence room, not the research station, a hidden server outside Nevada, a place where every document had already been copied. The truth was no longer one file. It was hundreds, thousands, impossible to erase. Pierce watched the video in silence. Then something changed. The confidence disappeared because he realized he had lost, not because of the evidence. Because the evidence was already everywhere. He looked at Vargas. You think this fixes anything? Nobody answered. Pierce continued. You think exposing us brings back the dead? His voice became louder. You think Claire gets her life back? The room remained silent, because those were the first honest words he had spoken. The truth did not undo the damage. It did not restore lost years. It did not erase pain. But it gave people something they had been denied. The right to know. Federal agents moved forward. Commissioner Alan Pierce was placed under arrest. The man who spent decades controlling the story finally became part of it. But one person was still missing. Claire Whitmore. After the video ended, investigators traced a signal. A remote location. A small cabin near the northern Nevada mountains. They arrived within hours. The door was unlocked. Inside was a table, a camera, a notebook, and a final letter. Claire's handwriting. She wrote, "For 29 years, you believed I was gone. The person I was in 1994 disappeared that night, but the person who survived carried the truth forward. She explained that she could not return to the life she lost. Too much time had passed. Too many memories had changed. But she wanted one thing, for people to stop asking why she disappeared, and start asking why she had to. The final line of the letter was simple. A cold case is not a case that has no answers. It is a case where the truth has been waiting for someone brave enough to find it. Detectives searched the area, but Claire was gone. Again, no footprints, no vehicle, no explanation. Just like 1994. The difference was, this time, she left behind the truth. And in Silver Creek, after 29 years of silence, the town finally knew what happened. But one question remained. Where did Claire Whitmore go after finally exposing everything? Because even after solving the mystery, the woman who started it all remained a ghost, a survivor, a witness, a person who disappeared twice, and whose final chapter was still unwritten. For 29 years, Silver Creek carried a question nobody could answer. What happened to Claire Whitmore? The town built memorials. Families waited for phone calls that never came. Investigators opened boxes, followed rumors, and chased shadows through empty deserts. Everyone believed the same thing. Claire disappeared because someone wanted her gone. But the truth was far more complicated. Claire disappeared because she discovered something powerful people had spent decades protecting. She found a system built on silence, a network built on fear, a secret passed from one generation to another, and instead of letting that secret bury her, she became the person who carried it. After Commissioner Alan Pierce was arrested, the investigation entered a new phase. The Silver Creek Preservation Council began collapsing. Former members came forward. People who had remained silent for decades finally spoke. They described meetings held behind closed doors, private agreements, hidden payments, threats disguised as warnings. The investigation revealed that the council had influenced Silver Creek for generations. They controlled businesses. They controlled information. They controlled the stories people believed. But one thing they could never control was time, because time had a way of bringing forgotten things back. The families of the miners killed in the 1978 collapse finally received the truth. For 46 years, they believed the deaths were accidents. They learned their loved ones were victims of a cover-up. The official reports were corrected. The hidden names were restored. The people who had been erased from history were remembered. But for many families, justice came with a painful realization. No arrest could return those years. No confession could undo the silence. The truth mattered, but the truth also hurt. Detective Elena Vargas understood that better than anyone. She spent months reviewing every piece of evidence connected to Claire's disappearance. Every interview, every photograph, every forgotten report. And she discovered something that stayed with her. Claire was never chasing revenge. She was chasing recognition. She wanted people to remember the victims, not the criminals, not the powerful names. The people who disappeared beneath the weight of someone else's decisions. The people whose stories were almost lost. Months after the arrests, investigators continued searching for Claire. They followed every possible lead, every sighting, every anonymous message. Some claimed they saw her in Oregon. Others said she moved overseas. Some believed she returned to a quiet life somewhere far away. But none of the reports were confirmed. Claire Whitmore remained missing, even after being found. That became the strangest part of the case. The woman everyone spent 29 years trying to locate was the same woman who chose to disappear again. But this time, she left behind answers. Years later, Detective Vargas would speak about the case. She would describe a moment she realized Claire's story was different from every other cold case. Most investigations begin with a disappearance. This one began with a return, a woman who vanished from the world, then came back long enough to reveal why. Vargas kept one item from the investigation, a copy of Claire's final letter, not as evidence, not as a reminder of the criminals, as a reminder of the person who refused to let the truth disappear. The last sentence remained with her. The truth survives everything. And in the end, it did. The abandoned mining sites were closed forever. The hidden records became public. The names connected to the conspiracy entered history. The town of Silver Creek changed. The buildings remained. The desert remained. The empty roads remained. But the silence was gone. For decades, people drove past the old mining road and wondered what happened that night in 1994. Now they knew. Claire Whitmore arrived there looking for evidence. She left carrying a secret that would cost her everything. Her home, her identity, her family, her old life. But it also gave her something nobody could take away: the power to expose the truth. The final official report classified the case as solved. The disappearance of Claire Whitmore was no longer listed as unexplained. The conspiracy was uncovered. The responsible individuals were identified. The evidence was recovered. But one mystery remained. Where was Claire? Some mysteries end with an arrest. Some end with a confession. Some end with a courtroom. But Claire Whitmore's story ended differently. It ended with an empty room, a forgotten camera, a handwritten letter, and the feeling that somewhere beyond the Nevada desert, she was still watching, still searching, still documenting the stories nobody wanted remembered, because Claire had spent her entire life chasing forgotten truths. And maybe that was why she could never fully return. Maybe the woman who exposed the biggest secret in Silver Creek was never meant to live an ordinary life again. Maybe after 29 years of hiding, being found was not the same as being free. The cold case that shocked Nevada was finally solved. The late-night arrest that stunned a small town became the headline everyone remembered. But behind the headlines, behind the investigations, behind the evidence, there was still one image people could never forget. A young woman walking into the darkness with a camera in her hand. A woman who disappeared. A woman who survived. A woman who returned just long enough to tell the world what happened, then vanished again. And somewhere, hidden beyond the reach of cameras and investigators, Claire Whitmore remained the final unanswered question of the case she spent her life solving. Because some people disappear because they are lost. Others disappear because they found something worth protecting. And Claire Whitmore found the truth